right. Esther, hi. I see you there now too.
Hi,
Wow.
Excellent.
Hi, Eric.
Oh, it looks like the stream is working. Wonderful. Okay, well, I'm very excited for this one. Thank you all for your patience. I know it's been like a month, and
Yeah.
it's been 105 degrees here, so it's
Oh,
here in Santa Fe. We had a little bit of a heat wave. So today we're going to finish what we started about a month ago with looking at the collective circuitry. And we're going to start basically by reading from the Book of Letters. Reading from the Book of Letters. So this is a real fun one. And I just really want to encourage group participation. So anyone who has comments on the gates, on the channels, please pipe in. I just think that'll be really fun just to kind of, just talk about them and just kind of, what are your associations? And if you have that gate, or, what's it like if you have a compromise in that channel and things like that. And I can kick it off. We can kick it off with 6447. I have the 64, and it's really interesting when I notice somebody who has the whole channel. Because on the one hand, if they're confused, they can make me really confused. Like, I'll amplify that. But on the other hand, I'm always impressed at how well they can cut through confusion. Is there anyone here who has 6447?
I but I thought I remembered you saying about the 6447 that you don't like to be around people that have the 6447 because they can't really make up their minds. It's like all this confusion and.
I don't think there's anyone I don't want to be around. I mean, that would be sad.
Yeah, not.
Well, if I did say that, then I'd like to amend it right now and say that I love being around 6447s that are real clear thinkers. I think I know what I was talking about. I think I was talking about, I knew a young philosopher who stayed with me for a while, and he is a 6447. And, I'll just say that when you have an undefined center, that undefined center in some ways is there to take in and appreciate or not the quality of the defined center. So with my undefined head, I have so much I love other defined head ajna because I'm undefined there when they're clear thinkers. It's incredible to me. It's like I can just get so excited, reading Hegel or listening to different philosophy talks when they have some incredible insights, and it's just so cool for me. In the case of my philosopher friend, we had some great discussions, but a lot of times he would be so confused, like his own system would be extremely confused, and he would be saying things that are really contradictory and just generally really confusing and using words in really ambiguous ways. And he didn't realize it. He thought it was crystal clear. And so if I said to him, that doesn't make sense to me, he'll go, it makes sense. Oh, it makes sense. It makes sense to everyone. You just don't understand or whatever, So it's like, obviously it doesn't make sense to everyone. But but I would never say that there's any channel that I can't be around. I mean, even the so-called difficult channels, like channel of struggle or something, it's great to have the channel of struggle around if you're working on a book, Working on a book is always a struggle. Or it's great to have around. You just don't want them around when you're trying to fix your car. So.
That's Michael was talking about that. One of his the last session that Michael did, talking about the channel of struggle. Yeah. Do you have that, Jonah?
No, I have 28.
Does Michael have that?
Yes, he has it.
Okay, Michael has it.
John has it, right?
Yeah.
Oh, John has it.
I have it in neon and flashing lights.
Right, and there's nothing bad about that channel. I mean, it's Martin Luther King had it, Gandhi had it. This is perseverance. It's struggling. It's fighting for things that bring life meaning. It's fantastic. But yeah, so
I have the 6447.
So you have the 6447, Julie. Is that what you're saying?
I do.
Yeah.
I live in confusion.
Or in clarity. So.
No, confusion. Mostly confusion.
Well, yeah, but then as an example of it, just to give an example, I have a friend, who's a musician who has that, my friend Daniel, And I only have the 64. And so I can be extremely muddled and extremely confused in my thinking. And I was having a conversation with a different friend of ours, and we're going back and forth for minutes, really, saying we're telling each other what this rhythm is, and we're asking each other, because we both study music theory, what is this rhythm? How do you transcribe this rhythm? How do you notate it? And he's just driving in the front. We don't even know that he's listening. But we're talking, and I say, well, is it a triplet? And no, it's not really a triplet. Is it a swung dotted eighth, this and that? Finally, Daniel pipes in. He says, it's a dotted 32nd note. And that's it. And it is. We're both like, no, it isn't. And we're like, it is. And we figure out what this rhythm is. And so, the 6447 can be really confusing, but it also has the ability to pierce through that confusion and to synthesize it into something. And also, it's really about looking back on past experiences in particular, and from those past experiences, getting different things out of them, from them. So something that I've said a lot about, understanding even just the word abstraction, because we're looking at abstract circuitry, I always say it's like extraction. You're abstracting, you're extracting some sort of juice out of some past experience that you had. And there's a lot of interesting nuances to that. For one thing, we can never really, we can only really trust the punctuation marks or the points of a story. We can't really trust what happened in between. So this is something that is inherent to all abstract circuitry that we'll be seeing as we move through these channels, and just kind of as we contemplate what it is to extract information from past experiences. It's basically that the only, like, there are certain state changes that we can be sure really did happen, but everything in between is kind of open to interpretation. That's the thing about past experience. It's very, if I said, oh yeah, I went into the bar and then I got kicked out because the person was being rude to me and I told him off, well, you can be sure I went to the bar and you can be sure I got kicked out, but, whether I was being rude to them or they were being rude to me is very much up for debate. So that's how abstract circuitry works, is that there'll be these points, these kind of story markers in the story, and then everything between the story markers is up for debate. And even the same person who looks back on the past experience from different vantage points is going to extract different meaning from that. That's really what it's about, is kind of being able to revisit the same singular experience from different points in time and to extract different information from that experience. So here in the White Book we have that 6047 is a design of mental activity mixed with clarity. So it's already interesting, and for me with my undefined head in Ajna, I really do notice the extreme difference between somebody who has 6447 and somebody who has 63.4, which is its mirror image on the logical side that we talked about last time. And the 63.4, they're almost unwilling to think about things if they don't know them. It's a design of mental ease, not mental activity. So the logical side of the mental stream of the Ajna and head is almost a sort of inertia, where I'll ask them, hey, do you know of a good restaurant I should go? No. Like, they don't even think about it. They don't even try to think about it. They'll just say no. And in fact, sorry, what's that?
I have that one too.
Oh, okay.
Both sides.
So you might notice that, you're not going to expend extra effort unless it's really something in your expertise. There's nothing wrong with this. It's just that showing the contrast between the abstract, which can be so full of mental activity, compared to the logical, which is kind of efficient and like smoothly operating, and and if they do know something, they'll say, well, yes, it's this, and they'll tell you immediately. It's very clear. It's like a very clear sort of thing going on. But this 6447, it's the pressure for mental activity. So it's the pressure. It's basically, especially for me with my undefined head, my not self of my undefined head with gate 64 was, because that's the only gate I have in the head, was basically always, or still is, if I feel some sort of pressure, I immediately want to just have a lot of mental activity thinking about it, racking my brain for past experiences, racking my brain for past examples, going through everything that I can possibly do to try to find something that'll break through that confusion. Now, I don't have gate 47, so it doesn't usually work. It's usually just a whole lot of confusion. So, cyclic mental images from the past. It's an interesting way to think of it. That's here in the white book. Cyclic mental images. The head is a pressure center, not an awareness. It's the beginning of the abstract mental process, and the keynote of this channel is mental activity. Confusion is not to be taken as a negative. It simply means that the pressure is a busy mind with a great deal of data, most of which is superfluous, that requires filtering before the pressure can be relieved. So it's this filtration mechanism of going through all of this stuff. While the logic process tests the pattern in the present to project it into the future, the abstract process is about experiencing the present in order to reflect upon it when it is past. The pressure of this gate is a flood of images rooted in past experience. When activated from the design side, this is also a powerful dreaming gate. Interesting. Since this is the mental pressure for the abstract circuit, the starting point is, by its very nature, a mixed blessing. So, yeah, so it's just basically, it's the pressure. Oh, we have C joining. Excellent. And C is on the cross of consciousness, which of course has the 64 and the 63 as part of its incarnation cross.
Hey,
Welcome.
how you doing?
And C, are you a personality sun in 63? Is that? Or 64? Sorry, you're muted. Can you...
Oh, there we go. Oh no, this is.
What is your personality sun in? Could you tell me?
64.
64. Oh, it is 64. Perfect. Well, perfect timing then. And so that's what's so funny to me, because the 64 is in Virgo, which doesn't seem like it seems like it would be Pisces according to traditional. But then the Pisces is 63, right? So it's weird. I always get those backwards. I always get them confused, as it were. But yeah, we were just talking about this gate 64, a design of mental activity mixed with clarity. And so this 64, this kind of pressure to filter through all of the images that are streaming in, the thousands of images, and to filter them and to try to make sense of them. It's not until it gets to the head center with gate 47, which is actually where it enters into awareness. The ajna. Because the head is not an awareness center, it's a pressure center. The ajna is, and I apologize, just talking about confusion is going to create a lot of confusion here. So. It's also been like over 100 degrees all week, so I have sunbrain. But in any case, so gate 47 is the potential awareness to recognize what makes sense or not. So that's kind of the other half of it. We have this intense pressure to filter through all these images, and then it's on the ajna side where it's the awareness to recognize what makes sense or not. And this is a projected channel, so the whole channel taken together would be recognized, if you're, so like as an example, Julie, one of the things you would be recognized for as a projector with this channel is basically recognized for your clarity of thinking or not, or recognized for your imagistic mind, recognized for your ability to extract or draw different meanings from past experiences, where some people, maybe a bunch of people had the same experience, and then they ask you what your experience of it was, and you just naturally kind of pull out some different meaning from that, and everybody goes, wow, that's incredible. I never even thought of it that way. I never approached it that way, and it can create a lot of clarity for them about what it really meant after the fact. Because you see, for each of the projected channels, particularly if you are a projector, that's going to be very key to your sense of recognition. It's not like all projectors get recognition for the same things. A 4816 channel of talent projector is going to be recognized for their skills and for their talent, and their depth of solutions and so on. A 6447, projector will be recognized for their mind. They'll be recognized for their clarity or lack thereof. They'll be recognized for their ability to extract different meanings from the past. And so the awareness potential of the 47 is identification of a single image, a freeze frame. So I love how beautiful that is. How it's actually funny because Ra is not usually very poetic. I mean, he's very technical and very. I mean, he's not usually that imagistic. But here he starts off this book, as we mentioned last time, saying that this was the book where he wanted to himself be a little more abstract, in the sense that he wanted to be evocative and ambiguous and use these imagistic words and so on. He starts the whole book by saying, I'm pretty sure I read the excerpt last time, how he has the least amount of abstract circuitry of any circuitry in his chart. And so one of the critiques of his black book and other things is, wow, it's just like reading an engineering manual. Where is the evocative, poetic, imaginative speech here? And of course he has Gate 12, which is part of another channel of poetry on the individual, circuitry side. But I also think of abstract circuitry as generally, imagistic, dream world, just using really interesting language, really interesting use of language and interesting words, and kind of ambiguous or up for interpretation. It's not as clear or precise as the logical side, which aims to formulate everything and put everything into formulas. But I guess, that's just, it's interesting here that when Ra talks about it as, Gate 47 is the identification of a single image, a freeze frame. That itself is such an imagistic way of describing it. And I think what he's saying is that out of this cyclical mental images from the past, the stream of images that the 64 is taking in, and it's up to the 47 to then go, pause, that's it. This is the image out of all those images that best encapsulates it. This is the synthesis of all of that. This is the image that kind of describes it. So you could see this at work. I haven't seen his body graph for a while, but in someone like Richard Tarnas, for instance, who in one of his first astrological writings associated the planet Uranus with the mythic image of Prometheus stealing fire from the gods. Nobody before that had done that. They tried to associate with the kind of Greco-Roman, Oranos, the sort of father of Kronos, and this kind of, and they were actually reaching all these dead ends, and there were all these images that just didn't really click or make sense for what that energy was about. And then Tarnas came along and said, no, it's not, this father of Saturn. It's actually the Promethean impulse to steal knowledge from the gods. And that's an example of this sort of freeze frame or distillation that allows you to then look back at all of the other experiences you've had with that planetary archetype and things like that and see them in a totally new light, because you now have this freeze frame of a new archetypal image. I do think abstract circuitry in general is pretty connected to Jungian thought and Hillman, and it's really interesting comparing the abstract to the logical, because they're always fighting for supremacy. You always have like abstract thinkers, purely abstract philosophers, who are claiming to be really logical, but they're decrying the type of dry logic that is actually logical. They're kind of claiming to be everything, and it's so interesting to see, and that you could really split particularly in areas like philosophy. You could split it down the middle, between those who are more on the logical or the abstract side. The same goes for James Hillman, the disciple and sort of antagonist of Jung, who he actually made it his project to get away from what he thought was Jung's overuse of concepts, which I would say is even more overuse of patterns and techniques, and to attempt to bring everything back to the singular. For instance, Hillman eschewed personality typology because personality typology was looking at what people had in common and what categories you could put them in, and using concepts in a way that connected people through similarity. And then, Hillman said, it's always imprecise. The only thing truly precise is the image. And that's a very abstract idea because, they're so imagistic. The funny thing is that both of them are really, homogenizing. And I don't agree with Hillman, and I don't agree with the abstract thinkers, because they're both part of the collective circuit whose aim is to homogenize. So it's really, if you want to get to what is actually singular, it's individual circuitry, and it's actually auditory, which is interesting to me. Because even an archetypal image can be a generic that people identify with, that hundreds or thousands of people identify. The soldier going off into battle is identifying with an archetypal image, and they're so, they've lost so much of their individual identity, shaving their head and wearing that same uniform and so on. So I guess I'm just saying I'm deeply skeptical of the abstract circuitry's attempt to claim to be the singular, because it's just as homogenizing as the logical. But at the same time, there is a real big difference here. It's the logical person with logical circuitry who will say, well, we've run all of the predictions, and this bus can seat 90 people, and it's equipped to be able to drive for 8 hours, and this and that. And it's the abstract person that says, I was on that bus and it was 98 degrees, and I'm never going to get on that bus again because the actual experience of it was so miserable. So the abstract is always linked to the actual experience of it, and moreover to the singular experience. The abstract person only needs to do something once. They don't want to do it again. There's had to be beginning, a middle, and an end, and they've had that experience, and now that they've had it, they can go back and relive it anytime they want and extract different things from it. But it's kind of like the never stepping in the same stream twice. Whereas the logical person will say, well, yeah, the first time it didn't work, but let's try it again. And after the 330th time, you're like, come on, you've tried it, but maybe 331 will be different. And they're just continuing to try it again and again and again. And that's how logical circuitry works.
Now, Joan, I have a question. For Julie, having both sides of that, what is that like?
Oh, because she has both channels, both full channels of the...
Yeah.
Yes. So anytime you're going to have two channels connecting the same two centers, it's going to be a little tricky. And Ra said basically, it's the most difficult when it's format channels. But anytime,
Right.
I've even met people who have three channels that are all connecting the same two centers. And there's going to be a certain amount of competition between those, and it's going to need some untangling to see when each one gets to come out. Because otherwise they can, for lack of a better word, contaminate each other. The example Ra gives with the format channels, and it's even something to be aware of in terms of the, when you're spending, like I have a 952 format channel, Jenny has the 4253. Already, just when we spend a lot of time together, we can, I haven't noticed this, but we could theoretically interfere with the smooth operation of each other's channels, because something that would have otherwise only happened once for Jenny, having the abstract channel, might start to happen again and again and again, because my energy causes it to repeat.
Right.
And something that for me should not be swayed by any sort of emotional, any sort of wet sort of feeling stuff, because I'm supposed to be dry and rational and logical, can get kind of contaminated by that, and I can get swept away in the experience of it and lose touch with my power to. So I would say, what Ra talks about, it's actually in the Channels by Type books that came out in 99 or 2000, and he kind of talks about the difficulty when you have competing channels, and that they basically each... So on the one hand, I think one of them will always be preferred, and it's hard to tell which one. Some of that can be through conditioning. Some of it could also be if there are other channels in the chart that connect to the stream, then it's going to be trying to pull more from that one. But both of them kind of need to be exercised. So similarly to when you have these kind of tricky variable configurations where you have a left mind and a right brain or something, and you need to meditate and you need to do chess or something like that. You need to kind of do both of them. So there's no real cut and dry easy advice other than just to be aware of how both of them operate, and then notice when one is operating and notice when the other is operating. And kind of when one's operating, keep the other out of it, so that if you're really trying to be a skeptical detective with that 63-4, don't even let the confusion enter into it. Stick to the doubt, stick to the skepticism, keep asking questions. And then if you start to get confused, just say, not going to go there, I'm just going to keep asking the questions. On the other hand, when you really are digging into that confusion, allow yourself to go into it fully and don't allow the skepticism, it's kind of like if you're doing some sort of active imagination, some sort of like Jungian active imagination, and the skepticism starts to chime in and there's this inner voice that says, this is all crap, it's not going to work. Tell that 63-4 to shut up and let the 64-47 do its thing. Let it go into the images. So it's kind of like the ability to recognize the difference in those two streams and to realize that they're not going to both operate simultaneously. They're going to operate kind of separately, and that's how they're designed to operate. And they can, if you try to do both of them at the same time, then they're going to interfere with each other. And you're trying to make sense of things, but the skepticisms won't stop talking, or you're trying to ask the right questions, but the rush of images is flowing in, and it's interrupting it.
Right.
So that would be an example. Yeah.
For me, that was super helpful because I have headaches all of the time. Like it's a thing for me. And I think it's because that's going on, or at least now I have an understanding of the difference. And I think I like my 64-47 better. I think that's what I'm recognizing. Like the authenticity of that and really being in my power in that way, because that is who I am. And I think that I've struggled and identified more the other way, but I like abstract better.
Well,
But
it's going to be important for both of those. I mean, it's important to give them both their due, and anytime something's neglected and kind of atrophies and doesn't get used, it gets all congested. It's not. So I mean, I would say, having both of those available, it's like you can both do active imagination, dream analysis, really imaginative, Jungian, abstract, imagistic work, past life recall, dig into, journaling and digging into all these wealth of images that flow in. And then on the other hand, you also have a mind that can be like a, Columbo, like a detective that can figure out what's amiss, what's wrong with the pattern, what pattern. It's almost like, I love the point where, Sherlock Holmes and like Watson, there's something where he says, I've got it, Watson. And then like Watson says, but there's like nothing here. And he goes, precisely. It's like the lack of the thing is what he's seeing. He's seeing what's missing from that situation. He's like, if they hadn't done it, there would have been evidence that blah, 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 or whatever. And that's a very, 63-4. It's like you're looking at all the patterns, you're looking at what patterns are there and which ones aren't. Well, I want to move on to the next channel, unless anyone has more comments on this one. But I feel like this was a good start, at least for getting the basics of how the abstract mental stream starts. And then, as we get through this mental stream, we'll go down to the 53-42, which is how the abstract experiential stream from the root starts. And then the only other abstract stream is the human experiential way, which goes from the root to the solar plexus. And just in general, when you're thinking abstract, just realize it's connected to the solar plexus in the same way that logical is connected to the spleen. So the abstract is the wet circuitry that's more about all those juicy experiential things. And, as opposed to last week, we looked at last month now, looked at the really dry circuitry. So the next in the stream is the channel of curiosity, the 1156, a design of the searcher. I have the 11. You have the 11, Jenny, and Michael, you also have the 11, right? And so basically, this is similarly to the 1333. Is it? I think we'll have to get to that one. I always get those two confused because they're both like storytellers. I guess it's because they're two of the three abstract throat channels, and one's coming from the ajna, the other's coming from the G center. But they both have a lot of similarities in that they're about expressing kind of what you've learned from the abstract process, if you will. I guess it's coming from two different directions. So the 11 is the awareness to visualize a realization or not. So that's interesting, to visualize. So it's like you realize something and then can you, and I always just think of it more as ideas for things. I mean, I have gate 11, and my experience with it is that I have so many ideas that, oh, here's an interesting comment from Michael. Well, I'll finish my thought and then we can read Michael's comment. My experience of the 11 is that it is basically coming up with all these ideas that I'm not necessarily supposed to act on. They're not necessarily good ideas, although some of them are. They're not, like, I don't really know who they're for, you know? They're for somebody. Like, somebody would love that idea. It would be great for somebody out there. It's just, most of them, I just write down on a little notepad just to get them out of my head, and then I don't do anything with them. And, you know, they're not really meant to be acted on. I mean, that's something about the ideas, is like, just because I've had the idea doesn't mean I should do anything about it. And I think I used to try to do more about it. The other thing Ross said, he said, if you have, you know, gate 11, then instead of always trying to act on your ideas, or, you know, trying to think that the idea is for you to do something with just because you had it, you can just give those ideas away. Just give them away to people. Just tell all the other people about your ideas. And if you have a good idea, you think it's a good idea, think of who to tell it. Or it can also be, I mean, he was joking, but he says, this is also, you just give people ideas to get them off your back. This is like, go outside and play in the yard, Timmy. Like, how's that for an idea? Or, you know, here's a ball. Why don't you go, you know, play ball or whatever? So it's just kind of, it's just ideas that are not necessarily that useful. Although Ra does say some interesting things about gate 11. He says they can often be good at investment and things like that. I'm not really sure what his reasoning is for that, but maybe it's just that they have ideas about, or they have interesting or kind of like unique ideas when it comes to investment. Like, I have an idea, I'm going to try this instead of trying the kind of normal way that people do. Oh, and let's read Mike's comment, and then I like to read from the book. The 1156 is sharing structuring of history. The 1333 is recounting personal experience. Okay, that's interesting because it comes from the G center, I guess. So they're both, because I think of them as both kind of storytellers. But I guess it's the 1333 that's like, the 1333 is the prodigal, the 1156 is the searcher. So what's the difference in the prodigal or the searcher? The prodigal is the one who leaves their country of origin, goes on all the adventures, and comes back and shares the adventures. Or kind of like the shaman who goes on the vision quest and brings back the knowledge to the people, and so on. The searcher, I guess, it still seems similar to me, but then I have a very, you know, logical mind, so I don't understand a lot of these abstract distinctions. But I guess there is a different bent to the searcher, that the searcher is the one who's out there. Maybe it's that they're always searching. I'm not really sure. I wish Michael would be able to talk, because I'd love to hear more about the sharing the structuring of history.
Isn't 33 the listener?
13.
13. Okay. 13 is the listener.
Oh, interesting.
Being able to recount like stories they hear.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Being able to keep stories without sharing it. Yeah.
So it's more of the storyteller then, but I know that 56 is the gate of stimulation and can really stimulate people with storytelling. So they're both, I guess, they're both kind of related. But okay, here's what Ron has to say about it, the channel of curiosity, and this is gate 11. The gate of ideas is the conceptual possibility which emerges from the difficult task of realizing. This gate prepares a concept for articulation through the capacity of its visual memory. So in the now, it sees only an aspect of the whole, yet over time, given its memory, it can capture the entire picture. So it's kind of like on a wave, kind of like an emotional wave. Ideas are not facts, they are possibilities. The process of making sense out of something cannot stop at realization. The goal of mental awareness is expression. The idea is a tool geared to express what has been sensed. This is a gate of those who seek stimulation, who have a need to stimulate, to share their ideas. So many people are frustrated when their wonderful ideas do not turn into realities, but look at the design. The fulfillment of an idea is its verbal expression, not action. Like, that's what the idea is there for. It's there for putting out through its expression, not, yeah. And with good reason, this is the circuit of cycles, transitoriness, and the wave. Ideas are not a prescription for action. They are stimulation for reflection. So that's very, very profound here, that this is, stimulating people to reflect. And then the 56th gate, unlike the 62nd, its mirror image, rather than transforming logic into language, the 56th gate transforms the abstract into language. This is the gate of stimulation that says, I believe. It's the expression of the channel of curiosity, the design of a seeker, a searcher. So let's see. The idea cannot be substantiated by formula. The idea is not a solution. The idea is a journey. Collective mental awareness is never about action. The eyes and what they see and how the images are manipulated within the mind are forever illusory. The collective mind is about translating the human experience into language. It is about fixing our relative place and time, the logic projecting into the future, and the abstract reflecting on the past. Not surprisingly, the 56th gate and its genetic relationship is a stop codon, a punctuation point at the end of a sentence. Once an idea is expressed verbally, that is the end of the process. So that's also the end of the stream here. So that was a 4-gate stream. As we've talked about before, the throat is kind of the vortex that everything tends toward. So I'm not great at it yet, but I've been trying to train myself to say the channels in the order, starting with the one further away from the throat, because that's the directionality of it. So, for instance, I always said 4629 because I'm biased because my personality sun is in gate 46. But actually, I'm trying to call that channel the 2946 because the 29 in the sacral goes up to the 46 in the G center, towards the throat. So I've been trying to kind of be aware of the directionality of the channels, although I'm not great at that. So next we have, so that was the awareness stream of sensing. This is now the awareness stream of feeling that we're going to start with next. And it's the one that I was referring to as the human experiential way. And it goes from gate 41, decrease, to gate 30, the clinging fire, gate 36, the darkening of the light, on to gate 35, progress. But the way I think of them is more of a story of starting with the root fuel of fantasy that galvanizes action. That gate 41 is the fantasy, which Mike is on 6th line of gate 41, his personality sun. But that fantasy that drives you, that pressure that builds up, and finally you go, I've been thinking about it for years, I got to do it. I've been fantasizing about it, I'm going to do it. So it drives you into action. Then you get there and you meet gate 30, the fates, and it's nothing at all like what you thought. I mean, it's like Fire Island or something. You've been fantasizing about going to the festival, you show up and they give you a sandwich and a tent, you go, what kind of festival is this? I don't know if you all know about that it was a big exclusive party on an island, and then people showed up, and it ended up just, So gate 30 is kind of, you get there, and it's nothing at all like what you thought. Then gate 36 is the crisis that happens. You go, oh no, this is something new. I'm having a new experience. Crisis only ever happens when there's something new, the first time, or the new experience. When it's happened over and over again, it can't be a crisis anymore. It's business as usual. And then finally you end up in gate 35, which is one of the maturation gates, kind of like 42 in the root. It's kind of this gate of having had the experience and having, being kind of mature about that experience. There's no more crisis. I think of 36, 35 as like, William Blake's songs of innocence and experience in that sense. But starting with gate 41, the design of focused energy. The energy to feel or not. It's interesting to think about that all of the root gates are fuels, and they all represent the energy for something or not. So when the tank is full, gate 41 is like ready to feel all sorts of stuff. They're ready. They're, sitting at home. It's kind of like the story of, Parsifal. He's sitting at home in his village, and his mom has sewn him the homespun tunic, and he's wearing the shirt, and he's kind of just like staying at home, working in the field and so on. And he's looking out at the forest, and he wants to go out on adventure, and he can't. And I think he finally gets rid of the shirt. He's like symbolically breaking free of his identification with his parents and with his small town life and so on. But, that fuel tank filled up to where he has so much energy ready to feel something new that he wants to set out into the forest. So this is the gate of contraction, captured in the traditional Chinese image of the gardener in his garden in the autumn, cutting back his plants. In terms of our genetics, the 41st gate is the only start codon. It attests to the importance of the sensing circuit in the stream of feeling. In particular, this gate fuels the potential to recognize. This recognition is through feelings. The fuel gates of this circuit, 64 and 41, are very similar. I guess he's saying that there's also a fuel in the head. I mean, usually he calls that a pressure gate, but I guess the pressure gates can be thought of as fuels. The 41st gate can contain all the possible range of feelings, yet, as in the mental process, it is only one feeling which will be of value. There's also a parallel between the 3 channels connecting the root to the solar plexus and the 3 channels that connect the root to the spleen. The channel of judgment, 5818, is a mirror of this feeling stream. The focus of this stream is to recognize, to judge abstractly through a single feeling. However, judgment is conditioned by the frequency of the now. Recognition is conditioned by the wave. It is never immediate. It is always a process. So that's, like my friend Perry would say, people take time to come into focus. All of this sensing abstract stuff takes time to kind of come into focus and to recognize what it really is. Was that feeling depression, or was it excitement? Maybe it was excitement for something new. Was it really boredom, or was it apprehension? Was it maybe actually a fear of something, or was it was it really pain, or was there actually some pleasure in there, and so on. So it takes time to recognize what that feeling really is. So as it gets to the 30, which is the gate of feelings, interestingly, and is in solar plexus, which is an awareness center. So it's the awareness potential to recognize a feeling or not. Gate 30 is the emotional equivalent of mental realization. Like its mirror, the 18th gate, which is the gate of conditioning from the parents, the 30th is the gate of fate. Feeling is a thirst for destiny and a hunger for change. Just a side note, I think I mentioned this in the description for the event. Ra called 30 the gate of desire, and he said, it's not in the sacral. It can't ever be satisfied. There's no such thing as satisfaction of desire. That desire leads to more desire, or really desire is. I mean, these are not his words, but this is more like, what we've learned from psychoanalysis is that what you really desire is to keep the desire going. That it's really a desire to continue having desires, to continue having feelings. That once you get what you desire, that desire moves on for something else in the same way that the feeling wave is always moving on. There's no final feeling. There's no ultimate feeling to end all feelings. So, feeling is a thirst for destiny and a hunger for change. Just as judgment leads to the conceptual potential to correct, the recognized feeling leads to the conceptual potential for change. However, there are distinct differences. Judgment and the capacity to correct take place in the now. Recognition of the potential for change takes place in the wave. The emotional wave moves from pain to hope, and the true potential of emotional awareness lies between these highly energetic poles. It is important to realize that only emotional awareness has direct access to the throat, that is, by its very nature, energized. See, spleen has access to the throat, but it's energized by the root. So it's interesting to note, and the ego is not, it's that's actually true, because there's pressure from the head, although it's not a motor. The root motor goes through the spleen. It's really the solar plexus is the only one of the 3, emotional centers that directly wires into the throat. The feeling for change must move through the wave. The feeling of pain, which initiates the yearning for change and a cursing of the fates. Curse this fate, I'm stuck here. I want something different. I want change. The feeling of hope, which initiates the yearning for change and prays to the fates. The potential awareness that can recognize the feeling and leaves its outcome in the hands of the fates. So, yeah, interesting stuff. Gate 30, the clinging fire. I also like what Ra says for those who have Gate 30, is that they're essentially angels of fate, or they're not pawns of fate, that's not the right word. They're arbiters of fate. That they're the ones who kind of, you know, you're like leaving the store and you're going to turn right, but there's a Gate 30 in front of you, and just unconsciously, without realizing it, you follow them to the left. And you end up getting lost, and you end up in a totally different situation you hadn't realized. And in Ra's black sense of humor, he says something, you know, and also in his mysterious way of talking, he says, yeah, you just go to the store to get groceries, and then you have to call your wife and say, I'm not going to be back for 3 to 5 years. So, the fates, what can you do? You know, end up in prison or on the run, or you never know. All right, now we are on the 3635 channel of transitoriness. I know quite a bit about this one, and Jenny has Gate 36 in her incarnation cross as part of the Cross of Eden. And this is an interesting one. I mean, it's definitely, it's crisis. It can be very exciting. I mean, it's kind of, if I thought of what Gate 36 is in a story, it's the darkening of the light. In a story, it's the end of the second act. The end of the second act is always when it looks like all hope is lost. There's no chance to win. There's no chance, even, you know, there's no, it's like in a love story, it looks like they're forever broken up and cast apart with no chance of ever being, you know, reconciled. In a classic hero story, it's the hero has been defeated and there's no chance that the hero will come back. Batman's been thrown, you know, in Batman 3, where he has the fight with Bane, and Bane defeats him, and he's thrown into a pit. And he has to, you know, and he can't move, and he's crawling on the ground in the bottom of the pit. That is Gate 36, the darkening of the light, when all hope is lost, when there's no chance, or seemingly no chance, for victory. So it's the crisis, you know, it's the moment of extreme crisis. It's also the only gate in all of human design that has connection to the actual act of copulation, the actual physical act. Interesting. And, you know, and it is kind of, shows this kind of connection between the sexual act and crisis, and that the first time, you know, whether it's someone losing their virginity or simply the first time being with a sexual partner, no matter how much people try to downplay that, there's no big deal, especially in our Tinder culture and so on, it's a big deal. It's a crisis. It has to be. It's genetically a crisis. It always is when there's some new experience in that way. So the other thing about it is, because it's always looking for novelty, always looking for the new, that it's, and as the mirror image from the 4816, going from the spleen to the throat, the 4816 would be perfectly content to take piano lessons every week for 10 years. The 3635 would pull their hair out after the second class. They want to learn harmonica one week, they want to learn drums the next week, they want to learn hang gliding the next week, and so on. It's the design of a jack of all trades. It's yearning for that new experience. It's inexperience that yearns for the experience and has the crisis. So of Gate 36, Ra says, the potential of recognition through feelings leads to the possibility of change. No gates are under greater pressure than 22, grace, and 36, the darkening of the light. These are the only two conceptualizing gates that have direct access to the throat and can manifest directly as action. Since it is emotional energy, the pain and hope wave that conditions this definition, rather than the possible emotional awareness that lies within the wave, the outcome is often destabilizing for the individual and for others. Only in this way is the 36th gate the gate of crisis. Change and changes in feeling are natural to the abstract process. The ultimate role is to be a witness, to remember and reflect. The shift of feelings determines the ending of a cycle, nothing more. But this can only be recognized through awareness. The energy overwhelms this possibility, and the change becomes either something that is dreaded or embraced, and fuels a life of expectations and inevitable crises. So I think Ra is really on the side of the kind of future transformation of the solar plexus to a pure awareness center. And so he's always harping on, war exists in the world because people are taking action because of the solar plexus. They're not waiting to get the awareness from it. They're taking, one general is not really low on their wave, and the other general is low on their wave, and they send people into battle to die out of an impulsive action taken from, that hope and pain, instead of waiting for the clarity. In fact, Ra said the dream of peace on Earth will only be possible when the wave stops, and when the solar plexus transforms to a pure, because basically, as an awareness center, it can process and learn from emotions. But right now, there's so much action taken when people are really emotional. I mean, I would say most people end up in prison because of doing things when they're emotional, or they're so high or low on their wave they make bad decisions. So I guess Ra is just kind of harping on people taking action from that crisis. He's saying only when you wait, and remember and reflect, then it can help you. But the energy from there, it overwhelms that possibility. So then your life is full of expectations and crises and dread and so on. The sensing circuit is rooted in its format of cyclical energy. It always requires beginnings, middles, and ends. The 35th gate is a key to this energy functioning properly. This is a gate of change conditioned by the cycle. This is the gate of satiating the appetite for change. This is the expression of the channel of transitoriness. Like its mirror, the 16th gate of skills, the 35th gate is experientially talented. Its voice says, I feel. And usually, I feel it's time for a change. This is the channel of expectations, but there is no light at the end of this tunnel. None. I feel if I do this, I'll get that. It's not a formula, and an expression of fact. It is a hope that will always lead to pain. This is not a design that can afford to be goal-oriented. This is a gate of the wheel turning. So he's again saying it's different than logic, where you can say, if I do this, I get that. The abstract is always pretending to be logical, but it's actually just hopeful, and that's going to lead to pain in the long run if they think, or if they say, I feel that if I do this, I'll get that. Well, you might get something else entirely. You never know. All right, do we have it in us to do 6 more gates? Because that'll do it. We're on the last stretch here. Everyone settled in? Good. Okay. And please feel free to jump in if there's any side comments on any of this.
I have to leave at 6.
You have to leave at 7?
No, 6 California time.
Oh, 6.
I've got 5.
Okay, well that's 5 minutes. Okay, well if you have any final comments, any parting ideas, before we start on the final leg here, which is the format channels, format, tantra, and expression. But otherwise, we can get going. And yeah. Oh, she just left. Okay. Well, in any case, I'll just keep going with it. So now we have the 5342. Oh, hi there, Julie. If you'd like to talk a little bit, yeah, we can't hear you right now. So. But yeah, I think we're just going to keep going with it unless you have any comments. I can jump in. Jenny, do you have any comments about your 5342? Or I guess it's always kind of hard to talk about your own channels because other people feel them so much more. Like, I can talk about Jenny's 5342, I guess. But if you have any comments on it, feel free to jump in.
Well, when I first learned about it, I could look back and kind of see those chapters, like the beginnings, middles, and ends of like certain experiences in my life. So like that's definitely an observation of having that.
That for you, when things are done, you're done with them, and they don't come back. Yeah. Well, and it's interesting when you see people who have only one half of this channel or the other. They're either really good at starting things, but then they get stuck in them and don't know how to finish it, or they're good at ending things, but then they just end up without being able to get new projects off the ground or new relationships off the ground. So if you only have half of it, it can be really, really tricky. But I can explain, one thing I've noticed, because Jenny has this whole channel, and I think I probably notice it a lot less than if I had undefined root and sacral. I have defined root and sacral, so I'd be interested to hear from someone who's undefined in that way, because they can probably really notice that, because they're amplifying it and they're taking that energy in so fully. I'm only taking that energy in at the gate level, not at the center level. And Ra does say that when you have an unactivated gate, you can still perceive the activation of that gate. For instance, I think most of us have around 40 unactivated gates. If you look at it, so we're all taking in from those gates. But it is going to be my take on it is not going to be as I can't really tell when other generators are frustrated very well. The same way someone with defined solar plexus might have a harder time. They might say, well, that person's acting weird, but they might not exactly feel that emotional energy from them. So I don't feel the frustration. I can detect it, but I don't necessarily feel it. But in this case, I would just say that the 4253, the 5342. I'm so bad at it. I just picked the smaller. Well, I don't even know why. I don't have any internal logic. I just, for whatever reason, So anyway, the 5342. To me, what it feels like is being energized to go out there and to start things and have experiences, and it feels kind of like this very it just kind of adds a lot more color to life. It makes things more exciting, or it makes it more for instance, I love DJing. I've DJed records for 20 years, and for me, DJing is kind of like working out or something. It's very repetitive, and I play the same songs over and over, and I practice the same transitions over and over. And then Jenny and I got into it, and it's so much more exciting. I feel like I'm on stage when I'm around her. It feels more like an experience, and we've actually made it much more fun. When we stream the DJ sets, we have all sorts of, each time it's like something different, a different theme, a different, and once I've done that theme, I feel kind of like been there, done that about it. We've done, even the styles of music. Yesterday we were listening to all Boogaloo, and it's kind of like, well, we've done the Boogaloo theme, so I feel like the 4253 goes into the theme, and it has the experience of the theme, and it's not that it only does it once. I mean, it could do it for years and years, but by the time it reaches the end, it basically goes, okay, I've exhausted this avenue. I'm ready to move on to the next one. And that's part of how it's phased. It has phases that it goes through. So it's called the channel of maturation, a design of balanced development. And it's the pressure to complete things, starting with gate 53. The pressure to complete. It's pretty interesting. I mean, I haven't thought about it like that. The pressure to just close the loop on it. The pressure to get it done, to finish it. Whereas the 42 in the sacral is the power to complete. The 53 is the fuel of the maturation process. The sensing circuit is all about transition and change. The 53rd gate, called development here, is the fuel of steadfastness. It's the energy to start a new cycle regardless of the changes that it brings. Like the other format gates out of the root, this gate carries the potential of depression. The pressure is to begin and ultimately complete the cycle. But without definition to its harmonic, gate 42, there is only stress and frustration. This is an energy which is always seeking new beginnings. The entire sensing circuit demands patience. The pressure to begin is not an awareness, it is a mechanic. The pressure rides a wave. It is always present. The intensity to start one moment will fall away in the next moment. Wait and see. There's no sense starting what one is not going to finish. This defeats the entire purpose of the abstract process. It's about seeing things through to their end, sticking with it. You can't start it and not finish it. And I think we felt that pressure, if we start watching a TV show or something, and then we stop watching it halfway through, like has happened, we have this internal pressure to kind of go back to it at some point. Like, we have to finish it. We have to see what happens. We have to stick through it to the end. Gate 42, the gate of maximizing the potential of beginnings through expansion. So I guess 53 begins it. 42 maximizes its potential by expanding it. This is also the gate of bringing things to a close so that the next step can be taken. The power to complete a cycle is the heart of the growth process. One thing at a time is its mantra. Here in this format is the core of the abstract process. Since there is no splenic center activation in this circuit, the cyclic process can be unhealthy and is always dominated by the presence of fear. Without the spleen, the recognition of the essential value of the now is missing, and yet for the stability of the abstract way, it must be accepted as essential. We exist in the now anyway, despite our perspectives. The change of the cyclical process is not the goal. The grail is the experience itself. The abstract being must be absorbed in the experience of the now in order to reflect on the experience later. The potential of growth is its power to mature through completion of each cycle. So here Ra is getting really dense and mystical and kind of complex, but I see that he's setting the stage for the channel I have, the 2946, which was one that was really hard for me to understand because everything I understood about the abstract process is that it's about not necessarily dwelling on the past, but at least ruminating and extracting from the past. And then when you get to the 2946, which we'll get to in a moment, Ra calls it the most existential channel. And here I am thinking of gate 20, the gate of the now, connected to the spleen, all about the kind of existential living moment to moment, being in the moment. And it seems so strange that the 2946 would also be like existential, like in the sense of being in the moment. But I think what he's saying is that there's really two sides to the abstract. The first is getting the experience. The second is making sense of it. And if you find yourself trying to make sense of it as you go, it's really not the right experience for you. I mean, that's something that I tell people and that I myself have learned having 2946. I tell others who have 2946, if you're checking your phone that whole time you're on a date or something, it's not a good date. It's not a good relationship. It's not a good, you made the wrong decision. It wasn't a sacral yes. You know, if you say yes to go to dinner and the whole time you're thinking about other things, what you're going to do next, what you have to do tomorrow, you're not absorbed in the moment. And so it kind of, and it just happens where, you know, I will get so absorbed in what I'm doing and one thing dovetails into the next, that hours will pass, and it's only after the fact I go, wow, that was like an unbroken chain of 8 hours of things happening. It's incredible. And I didn't once check my phone or think about it. It's led to my friend Vaughn giving me the nickname Mr. Toad, like Mr. Toad's Wild Ride, because I don't mean to do it, but, you know, as an example, I remember it was last summer I was doing an inspection for a house, and I picked up Vaughn because he was a plumber for 35 years and he's done a lot of work in houses, and I wanted him to also meet the inspector and do the inspection at the same time. So I picked him up bright and early at 7:30. I had 2 cups of coffee ready. We went to the inspection, and then at 9 I said, well, we're already kind of on the south end. I have to go to Albuquerque to pick up my friend from the airport. Do you want to just come along? And he's like, sure, let's see Albuquerque. Well, I didn't get him home till, 10 o'clock. Once we picked up my friend at the airport, it's what should we do? And then we went out driving and ended up, and one thing to the next. I have a good friend, Banyan, who has the 2946 as well. And he'll tell me these outrageous stories, how he went hiking and got lost and then found a road and hitchhiked and jumped in the back of a pickup truck. But it turns out they were on their way to a party, and, it just goes on and on and on. So I guess, this 5342, yeah, got the right direction. Yes, this 5342 is really the start of that. It's what fuels that 2946, and it's really I guess that's why Ra is kind of talking about. I mean, it's very obscure, but he's saying because there's no splenic center, there's no awareness in the abstract process for what's healthy or not, because the spleen knows about what's healthy, what's safe. I mean, gosh, the abstract process has led to YouTube videos, and if you look on YouTube, there's people doing all sorts of surfing the world's biggest wave and climbing the world's tallest tower. That's all experiential stuff. There's no spleen there. The spleen would say, hey, hold on a minute, this is dangerous. The abstract process is not really aware of what is healthy or not. It's only looking for the experience. And it can be dominated by the presence of fear, which is another interesting thing I never really thought about. That the spleen can quiet the fear, because the spleen can be aware of what it should be afraid of or not. But without access to that, it's just interesting to see the relationship of the fear to the abstract process. And without the spleen, the recognition of the essential value of the now is missing. But it must be accepted as essential. So I guess he's kind of saying that, we have to, that if you have a lot of abstract circuitry, and even in my case, I have an undefined spleen, and my personality sun is in gate 46 in this abstract channel, it's important for me to realize the value of the now and being so immersed in the now that but at the same time, I can't force myself. It's actually more of a signpost for whether I've sacrally made a correct decision or not. Because I might trick myself into thinking I made a sacral decision, but if I'm looking at my phone the whole time, I didn't. I did it because of a sense of obligation or a sense of, who knows what, pressure. So moving on to the 2946, design of succeeding where others fail, or failing where they succeed. That's the funny side of it. If I don't make a sacral decision, if I get into something, that I really don't want to do, even if it's the most basic thing, I'm going to fail where everybody else could succeed at that. It's also funny, so I have line 5 of gate 46, and there's 64 different fifth lines, right? And each one is going to be a different kind of projection. So if you have line 5 of gate 41, fantasy, everyone's going to project that you have a lot of fantasies. Like, they're going to think you want to do that. Well, in my case, they're going to project success. It's very hard for people and very disappointing for them to see me fail. It crushes their dreams to see me fail. It makes them just sad for me. Whereas, you see a third line fail or something and you're like, oh, they learned from it, great, but they see me fail, no. And also it's the projection of success, of continued success, where actually, because it's experiential, it's kind of like beginner's luck. I need to continually move on from one experience to the next. Ra's example is, fifth line in gate 46, like me, gets a metal detector, goes to the beach the very first day, finds a gold coin. Goes the next day, finds another gold coin, finds another. And then people go, wow, you have such a great intuition for finding treasures. You should keep doing it. No, they really shouldn't, because they're going to start to fail, because their sacral response connected to that gate 46 through this channel, if it is connected, if it's not hanging anyway, it's going to want to have new experiences. It doesn't want to do the same thing over and over. So it's interesting for me to notice how, that everything does have a lifespan for me. I'm not going to want to do everything, even things where my 952 gets to really dig in, like doing human design readings and stuff like that, it has a lifespan to it, and I have to continue to change it up and find novel approaches. And so maybe even at a certain point, these human design meetings will change their format and think of some other way, to make it exciting and to make it new again. Maybe in some years we'll all have VR headsets and we can all share a virtual reality, or something like that. Sorry, gate 11. That was gate 11. Okay. Gate 29. This is the tantric energy to empower the determination of itself. It is the gate of the sacral saying yes. This is the fuel to persevere despite the circumstances. This is the gate of loading up on piles of commitments and responsibilities, so there will be something to persevere about. The trick is to say yes to what is correct. The secret, as always with this circuit, is waiting. This power to persevere is conditioned directly by the format energy. So this is conditioned directly by the 5342. Perseverance is also cyclical. What we are committed to one day may no longer be of interest to the next. The wave dominates. This center is not aware, and the mechanical drive to say yes can be overwhelming. Yeah. So this is funny for me, having gate 29. I think it's true for anyone who has gate 29. I'm so used to saying yes that when I began to experiment with my sacral response, started to say no. People are shocked if I say no. There's so much expecting a yes that if they're on, they're like, oh, by the way, can I stay at your house? I'm like, no, not a good time. Like, what? What? I can't. You're saying no to me? It's so shocking. It's essential to remember that experientially, what one commits oneself to must be completed. After all, this is the energy of the channel of discovery, and the discovery does not lie in the commitment, but in the process. I don't discover anything by saying yes. I discover by what happens after I say yes, seeing it through to the end. Gate 46. This gate is the part of the cross of the vessel. It's a gate of love, the love of the body and the flesh. This is the gate of serendipity, of recognizing that beginning with one's own body, the body as temple, that one is always in the right place at the right time. Well, I can say right now that's not true. I've also been in the wrong place at the wrong time, and I think it's a real signpost for... And it also shows the deep connection between how much you enjoy being embodied and how much things dovetail. It's like this weird short circuit between, as soon as for instance, I have undefined ego, undefined solar plexus, I'm single definition. As soon as I stop worrying about proving my loyalty to my friends and about not, and hiding who I truly am from them and all the not self crap, then I start to actually really enjoy being in my body. And then my stomach's not tied in knots because of the undefined solar plexus avoiding confrontation. And then I'm not getting all hurt and offended and worried about having to prove myself. Then I actually start to enjoy my body and go, wow, it feels good. I'm going to go lay in the hammock. I'm going to go for a walk. I'm going to, it's just it's like I remember once, this was years ago when I still smoked cigarettes. I didn't have any cigarettes at the time, but I was just torn up in knots, having this stress about all the stuff going on in my life at that time, and I was so worried about confronting and feeling so hurt. I feel like with undefined ego, you can really feel raw, the sort of raw, emotional, just feeling so bad. And I don't know how I did it. I guess it was maybe the first year of human design for me. But I just was I'm going for a walk. I went for a walk. My brain kind of shut off. I saw a whole cigarette, a whole unsmoked cigarette, just laying on the ground. I picked it up. I smoked it. I was so happy. I went. It's like synchronicity, and it led one to the next, And I kept walking, and there's a band playing on a patio, and I got to see them play. And it's kind of like that. It's basically, if I start to get all wrapped up in the mind and in the not self, feeling crappy and feeling all it actually has a physical negative impact on my body. I'm actually not enjoying being in my body. It feels terrible. And then as soon as I can disconnect from that mental thing and kind of surrender to the process, I start to actually feel really good. Even if I have pain, it feels good to I injured my leg a few weeks ago. Not a big deal. I tripped and fell. It hurts, but at the same time, it can feel really good stretching. Even if it's in pain, there can be so much enjoyment of the body. And once that happens, it starts the process of synchronicity, of discovery and of good fortune. It's all dependent on the determination of the self, says Rob. It's through this channel the abstract process can find its promise or chaos. The determination to accept that one is in the right place is deeply spiritual. So I guess in that sense, he's saying that even if it feels like you're in the wrong place, as soon as you surrender, you kind of get back in the correct sequence of events. It's never too late. I can be why did I make this decision? It was obviously mental. I'm in such the wrong place. But even the fact that I'm berating myself and feeling bad about that is keeping me in the wrong sequence of events. And the moment that I surrender and accept, nope, this is where I need to be, and then just kind of turn off my brain, my mind anyway, and I start to just surrender to that, I'm once again in the right place. And all of the coincidences start to happen. And it's because of it's a determination to accept that one is in the right place. It is surrender to the cycle, and in that surrender is the potential for discovery. It's also clear that unless the abstract being can accept and commit themselves to the cyclic nature of their lives, their bodies will begin to fail under the stress of constant crisis, disappointment, and upheaval. So it shows the deep connection of the body. Gate 46, of course, even though it's in the G center, in the wheel, all of the next gates are the gates of the spleen. So gate 46 heralds all of the spleen gates. It shows that there's a deep connection between that experiential process and the spleen, just like we were talking about earlier, despite the fact that the abstract circuitry does not reach to the spleen. All right, we're on the last channel, unless anyone has any comments on that. And if Michael has any comments on this 1333, I know he mentioned about the distinction, but feel free to write them in the chat log, Nike. So this is the channel of the prodigal, a design of a witness. Oh, and there were keynotes, by the way, for these channels. The 5342 is format, of course. The one we were just looking at, the 2946, is Tantra. And now we're looking at the witness. It is expression. It goes to the throat. So the expression of the keynotes. So gate 13 is the gate of the listener, as we talked about. Oh, Mike's question. Does the 515 have a secret relationship to the solar plexus? Oh, interesting. Just for a little parallelism, how the 2946 is a secret relationship to the spleen. Well, you'd have to look at the at the wheel to see if there's a lot of solar plexus gates around the 5 and the 15. I'm not really sure. So, all right. So gate 13, the gate of the listener. And it's part of the Sphinx, and it's about direction and reflection. Where the logic process demands a role for the self, the abstract demands that the self listens. This gate is the openness of the self and interaction. It is a gate of the cross of the Sphinx and manifests direction. In the logic process, direction is a projection through which the collective is pointed toward the possibilities of a future. However, in the abstract process, direction is through reflection and points out the experience of the past. This is the gate of the listener. This gate will always attract others who will come and share their experiences. It's the channel of the witness and the completion of the abstract process. It is the point at the end of a cycle. Here, the knowledge of the cycle is accumulated as memory. There's also magic in this gate, for it is the gate of the hearer of secrets. This is the role of openness. Interesting, yeah. Yeah, so it's a G-center gate. It's about pointing to the past or directing people to reflect. So it's almost like someone comes, to a defined G-center with the 13, and they aren't sure where to go, and this defined G-center with 13 will point them to think back on when you were happiest. Think back when they're kind of pointing them to past experiences that will help unlock their next step. 33. The throat has many voices. Here it says, I remember. It's the voice of the witness, captured in the biblical story of the prodigal child, who leaves home and gives up their birthright to wander and learn, and then returns many years later much the wiser to be accepted back into the fold, so that the wisdom garnered in the experience can be shared through remembrance. This is the expression of the sensing circuit. This is the gate of retreat, of the need for privacy. Before a new cycle can begin, a period of reflection on the old is necessary. Unlike the 13th gate, where the secrets are locked away in memory, the 33rd gate is the throat, and its nature is to share its experience and to reveal the secrets. This is the gate of revelation. Despite what appears to be an ordeal, the sensing circuit is of enormous value to human progress. The storing of cultural memory has resulted in the exponential expansion of human capacity. Without the storyteller or the historian, every new generation would have to start from scratch. And that brings us to the end. Yeah, any comments, ideas, any questions? Personal experiences you'd like to share with experiential circuitry? Do you know anyone who's purely experiential? I always like to find the two things that I really like are when somebody has only one kind of circuitry or one channel, and as I mentioned before, when someone has a single bridging gate with split definition. Because those to me are respectively perfect case studies for learning the circuitry or the channel, and perfect case studies for learning about that gate. Because you have somebody who's really devoted their life to that gate, in the case of the split. But, see?
It's interesting. But quickly, I used to mention, I also have and people often tell me that I'm very and good at condensing knowledge into short snippets.
I'm only getting like every third word for some reason. Is that you said it's something about good at knowledge? Good at what is
condensing knowledge with the 1156 that I'm good at condensing knowledge. being succinct, telling the story of history, in order to sort of like impactfully get the point across, and then kind of move the conversation into that almost storytelling.
Because it's a punctuation, it's a stop codon. So you're able to condense the knowledge in such a way that people get it. It has an impact. I mean, you are also a manifester here to impact. It's probably stimulating, but also it can kind of close the book on it, or be like, okay, we're done with that now. Next topic.
Or to summarize something, and people are like, oh, okay, I'm going to check it out now. I'm going to go watch that 3-hour movie because what you said about it sounds interesting.
Well, I'm going to watch Funky Forest. I already downloaded it. That's a 90s Japanese fantasy that C told me about.
But then also, I think it's interesting that with my split, that all my head ajna, throat, G center, and solar plexus are all with abstract circuitry, and then the spleen and root I have the logic circuitry.
Oh, interesting. So you're saying that you really kind of have a schism, or not only between the centers, but between circuitry. So there's kind of two sides to you, and this one side is very dry and logical and rational, and the other side of you is juicy and experiential, and
Which that logical circuit is the 1858. So it makes sense by logical.
Oh, I know all about the 1858. I have 58, so I learned about that one through my compromise of it. Interesting. Well, great comments. Great comments. I'm really glad we're doing this again. I intend to do it every week again. I've just been, it's hard in the summer for me. It's been a lot of adventures out camping and, doing the things we can do during this time, which is basically being out in nature and so on. But I'm really glad to be back in this. And when others do host, I would love for someone to figure out the recording, because I'd love to see them. I am streaming this to YouTube right now, and I'm hoping it'll all work. I know last time we had some problems, but I spent time today getting it all working. Mike says, Channel of the Bard, the 1333. It produces the specific, personal instantiation of an experience that everyone who hears it can relate to. This is different than archetypal, which speaks universally. It somehow manages to speak only to those who are there at the recounting, even if they are unrelated to the story recounted. So interesting. So C would then have more of an archetypal, sort of like a universal thing, is what Mike is saying. But someone with 1333 has a way of drawing a personal connection to those who are implicated in it, even if they aren't actually, they've never had that experience, or Interesting. Yeah, I like this a lot. It's an interesting distinction. Well, I've enjoyed everyone being here. If anyone has any final comments, wonderful. If people want to talk about, moving forward, sharing some of the responsibilities for hosting, or if anyone wants to present, I'm happy to present next week. But it's just been a little bit. It's been a lot this summer, and so I even feel like today I was a little bit unprepared. Thankfully, in a pinch, we can always just kind of read through, through something. But it's just been. Sorry, go on.
It's Barbara. When you were talking about, I'm hearing an echo, so I'm not sure it's coming across clear.
Yeah.
When you talked about the what was it, the 6447, and you said it was a projected channel. I'm not aware, I can tell maybe the generated channels. That would be an interesting topic as to what each, I talked about that with Esther, I think, one time. Which of all of the channels are projected or generated or whatever other.
Well, I can tell you the formula right now, but I think maybe the topic would be, maybe we just look at what channels each of us have that relate to our type. So we could actually make it more focused because there's so many channels. But for instance, we could talk about Esther's channels, which are all projected because projectors only have, So, but the formula really quick is there's generator channels, there's manifestor, I don't know why. For some reason, the projector channels are called projected. I don't think the manifestor ones are called manifested. I think they're just called manifestor. I mean, I don't really know. Ra's a little bit loosey-goosey with his language sometimes. But in any case, the channels for projectors are going to be the channels that do not connect from a motor to the throat or to the sacral. So pretty much most of the channels. The generator channels all connect to the sacral. Every channel coming off the sacral, all 8 of them, are generator channels. And then the manifestor channels, except for the 3420, which is a manifestor channel. And then there's 4 manifestor channels. The 3420, kind of a special case. The 2145, the 3635, and I guess there's only 3 because the others are all projector channels. Yeah, because for them to get through, they have to go. Yeah, so there's actually only 3. My mistake. So really, the vast majority of channels are projector channels, so-called, projected channels. And what it really shows is that most of the channels need to wait to be recognized and invited. And if you try to use them, it's only going to lead to bitterness because, Now, it's interesting also to look at what channels you have. So, for instance, most generators are going to have some non-generator. Well, they're going to have some projected channels. I don't. I only have generator channels. But Jenny, for instance, has the 4426, which is a projector channel. So it's interesting to look at that. And then also you'll find manifestors who don't have manifestor channels. Like C, I think you have that configuration, right? Isn't it true that you have a manifestor? You're a manifestor because of a kind of series of projector channels that add up to being a manifestor, right?
As far as I know.
Oh, no, there are 4. Sorry. No, because you have the 1222. Sorry, my bad. There are 4. The 2212. That's right. So you are the pure manifestor then. So somebody, maybe it's Marissa who has
Emotional manifestor.
Okay, yeah. So you are. So sorry. So there are 4 manifestor channels. I forgot about the 2212. Yeah, and so if you have one of those, it's like also different than if you have. It's just interesting. Like if you have 5818 and then 4816, you're still a manifestor, but it goes through 2 projector channels. It's kind of interesting how that works.
But I guess that's the thing because I'm the odd man out manifestor where I do have the purity. Like the ego manifestor and the pure manifestor can act immediately. And as an emotional manifestor, you have to wait for emotional clarity.
You have to wait before you can initiate. Yeah, I like that little. Yeah. Yeah, well, I'm happy to make that the topic for next week. We could do channels by type and just talk about different types of channels, and we can maybe draw from the channels by type PDFs that I mentioned earlier, which are like kind of, I guess, mid-period, but kind of early period raw, where it's like 1999 to 2000, where he started to kind of lay out the relationship with the channels through the lens of type. And he also talks about creative channels, which is interesting. Some channels are especially creative, like the 8-1 and so on. So yeah, and if anybody would like to host, I'm happy to keep doing it, but I just am feeling like my energy has been spread really, really thin, and so it'd be nice to have at least a co-host if someone wants to do it. But if not, we can keep doing it. I want to keep this going, and I've missed it the last few weeks, and I kind of felt a little bit like, I wanted to catch up, and I was hoping somebody could record it so I could at least stay somewhat involved. But at the same time, it's been summer, and camping. Jenny and I camped at 9,300 feet up in northern New Mexico, and we saw wild elk, and it was really nice. So
You had a good time.
Oh yeah.
Wonderful.
There's another, okay, yeah, I see the. Oh, and then Mike also mentioned that the 1333 continues the stream of synchronicity. Very cool. All right. Well, does anybody else have any ideas? Any final? It's good to see you all again. Good to see some smiling
Yes,
faces.
good
I
to
missed
see
you.
you.
Missed you guys. Missed you gals, people.
I know it's about what Mike had mentioned, but the continuing the stream of synchronicity. I just thought it was really interesting how like the 2946 is like living out those experiences, and maybe like the 1333 is then capturing the story of the
Right.
synchronicity.
Good point. Good point. Yeah, that it's like they're different phases of the experience. And yeah. Very good. Well, who has the
Good
power
to see everyone.
Who has the power to stop this? I think Jenny has the power to stop it. She has the power for endings. Are we at the end? Did we complete it all? Did we finish?
Yeah, we did.
Yeah.
All right,
thank
so
you
we're
all.
going. Bye.
Thanks.
Thank
I
you.
really
Bye,
appreciate
everybody.
it. See you all next time.
Bye.
All right. Take care.
Thank you.